Welcome to the CareGiver Reality Show with your hosts, David Levy and Paul Vadiato, who bring you more than a combined 25 years of practical experience, helping thousands of family caregivers, helping them find solutions to the challenges and frustrations presented by this important responsibility. So if you are in the position of caring for a spouse or a parent, a loved one who is no longer able to care for themselves, or if you know someone who is, this hour will be worth the listening. Now, let's tune in to today's edition of CareGiver Reality with your hosts, David Levy and Paul Vadiato.
Good evening, South Florida, America, and the world. It's 5 o'clock here on the East Coast. It's Tuesday, so this is the CareGiver Reality Hour. You're watching us on caregiverreality.com or WWNN.com or WWNN 1470 on your AM dial, whatever. iHeartRadio, AMP2 TV, YouTube, you guessed it. Ain't no reason not to be able to see or hear us anywhere. And remember, folks, we're drive time on the East Coast, Central Standard Time. So those of you in the car, watch what you're doing. Keep your eye on the road. But we got an earful for you tonight. And we have a great guest. Her name is Carrie Parnes-Ruggiero. And her dad helped to found the Philadelphia Comprehensive Autism Center.
Philadelphia Mental Health Center.
Philadelphia Mental Health Center, and she is the CEO of the Florida and Philadelphia Comprehensive Autism Center.
The Philadelphia Mental Health Center and the Florida Mental Health Center. And yes, the Florida Comprehensive Autism Center is part of that.
Okay, very good. It promises to be a very, very interesting discussion. She's a real authority. Paul's known her dad for a long time. He is a founder of mental health services in Philadelphia, and I think that regardless of who you are and what you are, especially if you have a child, a grandchild, somebody that you know on the autism spectrum, this is going to be a discussion that you're going to want to hear. So welcome to the show.
Thank you.
And as we start every show, Paul, how was your week?
Well, good afternoon, David, and good afternoon to all of our listeners out there. I hope everyone had a good week in caregiving. I know it's been cold and snowy in most of the area. Here in South Florida, we're going to get a cold snap of 55. I really have been delaying the question, David.
What?
It has not been a good week in caregiving this week.
I know it hasn't.
It has really been difficult. We have that yo-yo effect. We've been for numerous tests. We have more to go, and it's not only the physical, but it's also the emotional now that is really starting to enter into the equation. And, it's one day at a time is how we take it. How about Suzette, David?
Well, it once again got her out to the physical therapist yesterday, who did a thorough evaluation, and I think almost didn't have enough room on his checklist to check off all the things that were problematic with her. She's got to go back and literally learn how to walk all over again and build up enough strength if we're ever going to even think about doing this other knee. And so she came home. She was kind of discouraged with that. And so mentally it wasn't a good day. And physically it really set out a challenge to her that I don't know whether she's up to it or not.
I also think, David, getting now into the holiday season really starts to play into this. People are starting to feel, wish I felt better, wish I can do more, and those little daily setbacks here and there just take its toll.
There's one part of the holiday coming up that fits you and I.
What might that be?
Black Friday. All right, I don't care how you describe it. There are no sales in caregiving. All right, and Black Friday is very emblematic, I think, of some days that's just exactly how I feel when I get up and I say, what do we got to deal with today? Mm-hmm. But, yesterday was very rewarding. A longtime caregiver client, his wife passed away from dementia. And there was a very nice ceremony that took place in the clubhouse near where he lives. and the turnout from the caregiver family that has assembled both at the facility where his wife was and also attends one that I do on Wednesdays, were there. There were probably more caregivers there than there were family. And to a person, they were there, they supported, they were just terrific. It was for somebody that does these things, that runs support groups, that has a great sense of understanding of the caregiver and the support that they offer. They were terrific. He asked me to say a few words, and I complimented him on his caregiving, but more importantly, I complimented the group who turned out in force to be whatever support they could be. And so it was very rewarding. It makes all those years very worthwhile when you see something like that happen.
Caregivers need support groups.
Let me tell you, nothing beats hands-on. Yes, you can do it on the internet. Yes, you can do it, indirectly, talk to your friends, etc. But one of the things that I've learned about support groups, and Eleanor, if you're listening, you know this, that if we didn't meet every Wednesday, because caregiving just can't wait a month. It's got to be done week after week after week. And to that extent, we've been doing Wednesdays, I think, for the last 14 years in various locations. And Wednesday has become, just like in the West End, it was Spaghetti Day. All right. It is Caregiver
Wednesday.
Well, there's Caregiver Tuesday, Wednesday, and Friday, but Wednesday has become emblematic, at least for me, of the large interactive support group.
David, last week we started a new segment on our show called From My Perspective, and I led it off last week and spoke a little bit about the elections, and I got some very interesting feedback, very similar to what you and I had shared on air.
Right.
And I think you have some ideas for this week's From My Perspective. What's going on?
All right. Well, I've had a number of phone calls in the last week or two from caregivers and others that I know that are above the age of 65, and they're trying to figure out what do they do with Medicare Advantage. And for those of you that don't know, there are two different kinds of Medicare, essentially. There's fee-for-service, which is what everybody gets when they turn 65. Part A covers hospitals and facilities. There's a deduction from your Social Security for Part B that essentially covers doctors and in-facility medicine. Then you have a supplemental policy or a gap policy to cover that 20% of copay or most of it. And then there's a Plan D, which is the drug program. And, that's where you have the hole in the donut and you pay a certain amount. And when you get up to a certain amount, then Medicare kicks back in. You've got to, I think, be into it close to about $6,000 between premiums and copays, and then that gap in the middle. And I went out to help my clients and to get a better understanding. I've been using fee-for-service, and we're lucky enough we have our supplemental and drug program from my wife, who was able to keep what she had from the hospital district where she worked. So that essentially covers what we need to do. So I'm not out it's not cheap, but I'm not out on the hustings looking for supplemental gap and D.
So this is the traditional Medicare that's been around.
That's traditional Medicare.
Okay.
And then a number of years ago, following, I think, the reasonable success inside of major medical of things called HMOs, health maintenance organizations, Medicare decided that they would allow certain organizations, insurers, health plans, etc., to create what are called Medicare Advantage programs. And essentially what that means is Medicare pays in a monthly stipend to that Medicare Advantage organization, and they in turn put together panels of providers. They put together hospitals and facilities that are within that panel, and there are all different kinds of Medicare Advantage programs as well, and some include the Part D, so that it includes your your drug program. Some also have hearing, some dental, and on occasion, then they all have something called Silver Sneakers, which is basically an exercise and wellness program. So I went to go look. Would it surprise you if I said, and for those of you that are living in Peoria, down here, we're broadcasting from southern Palm Beach County, and just underneath us is another county called Broward. And between Broward and Palm Beach County, there are 154 Medicare Advantage programs. There are more Medicare Advantage programs than there are new car dealers. And when you go to the internet and try and figure out what you want, all right, and you go to wherever it may be, there's the STAR system, which nobody really understands, all right? There is rating systems that are put together privately. Anytime you try and investigate something, it pushes you to speak to a registered insurance broker, which ultimately you need to do. But that's like saying, if I wanted to buy a car, all right, and I wasn't sure which car I wanted, it's very, very tough to go around to the dealership and be told the moment you walk in the door, here's your salesman, and you're not going to find out anything about the car until you sit down with the salesman, who's going to bite you on the leg and is not going to let you leave until he has sold you that DeSoto or Packard or whatever.
Kaiser.
Right, exactly, whatever it may be. So in the course of doing this, last week I was watching Face the Nation on Sunday. Happens to be Meet the Press, Face the Nation, have been two programs that I have followed religiously over the years. And following that was a paid program for one, and I'm not going to use any names, all right, for one of the major Medicare Advantage programs. And all it kept saying was zero copay. Zero this, zero that. Didn't tell you whether it was a health maintenance organization, didn't tell you whether it was preferred provider. The distinction being with an HMO, you normally have to pick a primary care physician who acts like a gatekeeper and writes referrals for you to see specialists. PPO allows you pretty much to pick who you want to go to in the panel without having to deal with, quote, the gatekeeper. Traditionally, it costs a little more than the HMO. And there are things called SNP, SMP, and those are special needs programs for certain people that have chronic illnesses and other kinds of extensive clinical needs that would benefit from a very focused care program and certain specialists.
For example?
For example, maybe a Down syndrome child or adult or somebody with a very severe stroke or something along those lines that has special needs. Could possibly be mental health issues, but there aren't as many SNPs as there are HMOs and PPOs. So I'm going online and I'm trying to find that every time I find one, and I want to see whether or not the hospital that my person who's asked me the question and who the EMTs will take them to automatically is in the plan. And every time I do, it shoves me right to a telephone, an 800 number to call the broker. And I don't want to talk to the broker until I've made myself smart. And I can't do that because all it keeps telling me is zero copay, zero on generic drugs, $45 on branded specialty, and another number for something that's outside the formulary. I can't get the formulary online right away, so I don't know if all my meds are in there. So it was a very frustrating experience. Then on Monday, after this whole frustrating Sunday of trying to do this, I'm reading my morning paper, and there is another major Medicare Advantage program, and listed are 100 names of, I think, doctors. There's no credential after it. There's no specialty after it. I have no idea. There's 3 Marcus Welbys. Is it my Marcus Welby? Is it somebody else? Is it in my area? I mean, I go to a practice that's called the XYZ medical practice, and so rarely do I look at all the names of the doctors that belong. So I'm looking for the XYZ nothing, just all these names. And you're not sure whether they're doctors, whether they're people in the plan, or whether they just signed on to be in an ad. And it really frustrated me. And I'll be self-serving, Paul, and you can correct me. I'm not stupid. Went to law school, got a degree in gerontology, do this for a living, and I found it to be one of the most frustrating processes that I've had to go through. Now I can imagine somebody with poor eyesight, difficult hearing, that may not be computer literate, that only sees in big letters in a newspaper 0000, and picks up the phone and gets, respectfully, a broker on the line who says, this is exactly what you need, and here's the reason why, and this, that, and the other thing, send me the premium. Or I'm
sign on the dotted line.
Or sign over your Medicare payment to me. Mm-hmm. And so, from my perspective, all I know is that if I want to go and buy car insurance, I can go online to Esurance or Geico, and in 7 minutes or less, all right, they will give me 4 alternatives, explain every damn thing I need to know, and I'm off and running, and I've made choices. I can't make choices with Medicare Advantage, and I don't want to sit through 7 different lectures at a Chinese restaurant, respectfully, from some guy that's pitching his particular product. I remember that from the old days with long-term care insurance and everything else. Come, have dinner with us. Let me pitch you. You'll love what I have. All right? It seems to me that it's a very difficult system. And when you have 150 choices between 2 counties, and even we split them in half, 70 in each county, and where do you start? What is it that even breaks the ice, other than maybe you see a familiar name? All right, so you see one of the very popular names. Are they the best service, or are they just the guys that can buy the biggest ads? So from my perspective, I think that Medicare Advantage, 2 things. 1, it's great if you're healthy. B, it's done a lot of people a lot of good. C, and I just added C, it's a very, very difficult system to work with, and I really think that we've got to do some homework so that the people that need it and want to sign up for it. Matter of fact, the statistics say that most people don't change because they don't know how to change. And those with fee-for-service that might benefit from Medicare Advantage aren't sure how to take that change. Those that were and want to go back, it's a little bit easier, but the whole process is fraught with roadblocks to making easy, informed decisions. And from my perspective, that's wrong. All right? Enough of a speech?
Yeah, David, you might remember our doctor of pharmacy, Antonella Martino.
Right.
And
she was great.
She is the subject matter authority. And I spoke with her the other day, and I asked this question. I said, if somebody comes in with their list of meds that they take, can you sort of help them in making a decision in terms of just the medications where to go? And her answer was, no, we can't. And the Board of Ethics says we can't make any recommendations.
Right. And one of the reasons was because they felt that the pharmacist, when you came into the pharmacy and said, I'm taking this, 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 and this, and he says, well, 2 plans have it, that they were steering you, or that maybe they were steering you to the plan whose third-party administrator, or the guy that handles, approving your drugs and the payment process, and is affiliated with that drugstore, had a self-serving motive. So the person in the best position to know
can't help.
Right. All right. And so now you got to call your doctor and say, are you on? Are you on? No, I'm not on that one. I'm on this one. Well, does this one do this? And they say, I don't know.
Call them.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so while the open enrollment has just started and will be going for the next 6 weeks,
David, we're working right now on getting a neutral third-party advocate who understands the way these plans are put together, and hopefully we'll have him or her on the show to be able to help clarify some of these choices.
All right. Well, I know he's coming up soon.
Yes.
Or her.
Yes.
All right. It's
yes.
a husband and wife, or a male and female team of experts on this who hopefully can simplify it, because I need to understand the ABCs, because it's very difficult for me to pass on the right information to our clients.
And it's going to be a test.
Okay.
David, I think it's time we take our break.
All right. Kenny, why don't we take our break, and when we come back, we got a couple of comments, and then we're going to have the opportunity to hear Kerry Parnes-Ruggiero, regardless of which facility she's affiliated with.
CFC support helps fund research. You can too. Each year, thousands of men and women serving their country in the U.S. military, as well as other employees of the federal government and the U.S. Postal Service, provide support for medical research to find treatments and cures for diseases. This is done through the Combined Federal Campaign, an annual workplace giving campaign that allows eligible individuals to support charities, such as those that conduct medical research, through a payroll deduction. Money donated this way to the medical research charities and its member organizations helps fund research to fight diseases from Alzheimer's to cancer, multiple sclerosis, blindness, breathing disorders, and much more. The diseases included afflict people of all ages, from the very young to the very old. You don't need to be a member of the military or a federal government employee to support research to help you or those you love that are suffering from an illness or disease. Donations to our not-for-profit tax-exempt organizations are tax-deductible and provide a vital source of funding in the fight to defeat some of life's most dreaded diseases. Please visit the website of the Medical Research Charities, which can be found at medicalresearchcharities.org. That's all one word, medicalresearchcharities.org. On that website, you can learn more about our member charities and make a donation in support of the research they're conducting for a specific disease or family of diseases. You can make a donation to Medical Research Charities itself and support the work of all our member charities. Please visit our website today, medicalresearchcharities.org. Become a part of Joining Forces to Find a Cure. Are you a family caregiver? Are you taking care of a spouse or loved one who can no longer take care of himself or herself? Are you dealing with Alzheimer's disease and don't know what to do? Do you feel burned out, frustrated, and just don't know where to turn? You've tried doctors, lawyers, and mental health professionals and have come to realize that they don't have practical answers to these questions. What you need are experts, non-clinical family caregivers with 25 years of active experience helping thousands of family caregivers like yourself. People who can help you provide a better quality of life for yourself and your loved one. Who you need are David Levy or Paul Vadiato. Reach David at caregiverreality.com or reach Paul at caregiverreality.com and let them help you pick the right path towards improving the quality of life for you, the caregiver, and your loved one.
Hello, South Florida, America, and the world. This is David Levy, co-host on the Caregiver Reality Hour, and talking to you live from South Florida. We have a show that no one should miss because we're talking to 50 million caregivers in the United States and probably 100 million around the world. It's an opportunity to hear what the experts have to say, and more importantly, if you realize that the market for caregiving is as enormous as it is, you should get in touch with us because we're looking for certain select advertisers that want to be part of the Caregiver Reality. And those of you that want to be part of the Caregiver Reality family, get in touch with us, David at caregiverreality.com, Paul at caregiverreality.com. We'll get back to you because this is too important in your marketing to miss.
This is Caregiver Reality with gerontologist David Levy and caregiver expert Paul Vadiato, who ask you to call in and speak with him on the air toll-free at 888-565-1470. That's 888-565-1470 to share a story or important information. Now, back to today's Caregiver Reality Show.
And we're back. And for those of you that weren't sure, you can catch us on WWNN.com. That's the Beasley Broadcasting Network. We're simultaneously broadcasting on their station tonight, as well as on caregiverreality.com and all the other places that the show goes out to. And we want to give Beasley a big shout out for supporting us that way. We're broadcasting from their studios here in Boca Raton.
Good people.
Good people. And, as far as one of our regular supporters is Medical Research Charities. I mention them every week, but I do want to make a point that Medical Research Charities has underneath it 29 or 30 different charities that pretty much cover the waterfront in terms of medical research, cancer, dementia, brain tumors, allergy, you name it. I mean, childhood diseases, etc. And there's a difference between the national organization that raises awareness and the research organization that really grinds out the stuff that hopefully finds a cure or helps to mitigate the problems or at least light the way towards having those kind of things happen. And I've been talking with them, and going forward, we're going to make it a lot easier for our audience to do something that will help them and I think make the whole cause of contributing a lot easier. Starting next week, there's going to be a phone number, not for you to have to make a pledge to, but to get involved with Medical Research Charities as a listener, to like them, to be able to get some information that they have on all of these underlying charities, because one call will do it all. You can either make it to a specific organization, or by making one contribution to Medical Research Charities, you'll be able to contribute to all of those charities. And it's a great way, holiday time, tax time, to make your charitable donation, make it in the name of a loved one, whatever, make it to one of the organizations you feel strongly about, or if you just want to see research move ahead on a lot of different levels, my suggestion is starting next week, we'll be giving you that phone call, and I've kind of coined that phrase, one call does it all. And in the meantime, if you want to see what they're doing or to make a donation, it's Medical Research Charities, just one word, medicalresearchcharities.org. And as we're moving forward, one of the things I want to let you know is that Paul and I broadcast from a different studio last week, and we sat there a little bit like frozen monkeys, and we kind of apologize. It was brand new. Paul and I were sitting with our backs to a table, and we couldn't see one another, so we didn't know when one was ready to speak and the other wasn't. So we did stumble a little bit, but we're working it out. Our producer is working a completely different layout. And although next week we still will be here in the studio at Beasley Broadcasting in Boca, because we're going to be Skyping in a very special guest, and this is the best place to make Skype work.
Speaking about special guests, David.
Yes, and tonight, as I said earlier, we have Carrie Parnes-Ruggiero, and her dad helped to found Philadelphia Mental Health Center, and she is the CEO of that organization, as well as the South Florida branch that focuses on mental health, but also has a special spot in its heart for autism. And this organization was founded back in 1953, I think.
Correct, 1953.
Some of the first people on their board of directors were names that we know. Pearl Buck, who was a Nobel and Pulitzer Prize winner. Theodore Reich, who worked with Sigmund Freud. In 1963, the Philadelphia Health Center had the first 24/7 crises line for emergency mental health, probably even before the suicide hotline, wasn't it?
Absolutely.
All right, so you have really been leaders in a lot of things. And the Philadelphia Mental Health evolved. It developed a specialty treating children on the autism spectrum. And in 2007, it opened its first Northeast Philadelphia branch, which hosts the after-school autism program called ASAP, a specialized year-round therapeutic program for children 5 to 12 on the autism spectrum. I'm going to leave the rest of this discussion to you, Paul, but I'm so pleased to have you here, Carrie, and with more than 7 million children on that autism spectrum, and I know plenty, including in my own family, you guys are real groundbreakers, and we're so pleased that you picked Broward County as one of the places to become an outpost for your excellence.
Thank you, David. We're really pleased to be here.
Good.
And Carrie, you've been a longtime friend, and I really appreciate you making the effort to come down and join us tonight. And we want to try to get as much information as we can out to our listeners. Mental health is such a broad area of topics. Can you sort of give us the lay of the landscape? What kinds of things are you looking at the centers?
We focus on services for children and their families at this point. When I say at this point, because we have a broader vision that has come out of our work with autism, we've focused on treating children for the 15 years that I've been CEO, and one of the things that we've learned is that children grow up and they continue to need services. So we're expanding that vision of what we do. But for right now, we really focus on children with all kinds of more intensive mental health diagnoses. We have a specialty in autism, and probably about 60% of the children that we treat are on the spectrum.
If you had to give the Walt Disney Mickey Mouse version, and it's not Mickey Mouse, of autism, how would you describe it to those that have heard that word, autism spectrum? But what does autism mean to a professional like you, if you can just kind of break it down real quick?
Okay, that's a big task.
All right,
because autism spectrum is the key word there.
Mm-hmm.
It is a spectrum. It's a very broad range. There are children and adults who are in the in what we used to call the MR range in terms of IQ, and are
is that marginal? MR.
Intellectual disability. They have very low IQ.
Gotcha.
And they're really not able to function on their own. And there are children who literally have a genius IQ. So there's a very broad range. There are children who have mostly the problems with relationships,
Mm-hmm.
which is what autism really has to do with developmental delays, social skill difficulties, sensory difficulties, an inability to process information, and then communicate that information to other people. So it pervades one's existence in the world and one's relationships. To what degree, what does it really look like? It depends on whether someone is very severe or not very severe, what their IQ is, etc. We bring children in. If we're lucky enough, and the parents are lucky enough to realize there's a problem, we can diagnose a child at about 1 year of age.
Can you spot? I mean, you can diagnose it from a professional's perspective. Would a parent, and let's say this is a first child, be aware from a developmental perspective that their child was having problems in the first 12 months? I mean, I know I had a child with birth defects. It was very, very obvious from day one that there was something wrong. But in a developmental aspect, is it easy? Not easy, but can it be spotted?
It's not easy, and not only do the parents not recognize, but very often the pediatricians don't recognize. Unless, if you have any suspicion, get your child to a developmental pediatrician,
okay,
who really specializes in this. But what you'll begin to see, it's before the age of 1, you're not going to see very much. Between the age of 1 and 2, you're going to begin to see a delay in language generally, a delay in an ability to make other kinds of communication, to maintain eye contact, to follow directions, to stay focused, even for the shortest amount of time on a task. At the same time, you'll see children that begin to perseverate or begin to have particular types of interests or tasks that they become obsessive about. A lack of interest in other people, a lack of interest in playing with. They really go solo. And it's difficult because they're so young, and some of this is typical of children between 1 and 1.5. At 18 months, you begin to move from parallel play, a little bit more towards interactive play.
I mean, I don't want to
And you
scare
start
every
to s-
parent
and you
of a
start to s-
newborn.
You start
you
to s-
know?
no, you're not going to see anything when a child is newborn, and you're probably not going to see it until the child is about 2, where you begin to notice that maybe they're not up with their peers, and maybe they're not interacting. You call their name, and they just don't respond. Now, the first thing you're going to check for is a hearing difficulty.
Yes.
Okay. The other thing that and this is another reason why parents really shouldn't panic, is many children have developmental delays that are very small. We don't all develop. None of us develop on the exact same timeline. So, I mean, I had a son who didn't walk until he was almost 16 months. I was very worried about that. He also happened to be off the charts in size. And the doctor said he basically doesn't have the muscle development and coordination to lift himself, to lift his little tuchus up off the ground.
Right.
He'll get there. It's okay.
Right. He should crawl some more.
There's nothing, it's okay.
Yeah.
There's nothing wrong. But when in doubt, go to your doctor.
Okay.
Carrie, why do the numbers keep dropping? I remember at one point it was 1 in 150 children are on the spectrum. And recently I heard as low as 1 in 54
Males?
it is considered on the spectrum. Is it that
correct.
we're getting better at diagnosing it? What's going on here?
It's some of that. I think that there's the most recent article that I've read regarding the reason for that. Of course, it's asked all over the place. I think that there are numerous reasons. Some of it is that we're getting better at diagnosing. Some of it is that the diagnosis itself has been broadened. We understand more.
You mean by opening up that word spectrum, more fits under the umbrella?
Yes, it used to be when we went to school, and there was that kid in high school who was really kind of a geek and really brilliant and really good with math or computers or science, and kind of stumbled when he went down the hall a little bit, and stuttered when he tried to talk to a girl, and he never really kind of got out of that. But he was the kid you would go to help with your math homework. He probably had Asperger's or high functioning autism, but we didn't diagnose that back then. We didn't understand it.
He was just different.
Yeah. He ended up in Silicon Valley and made a lot of money. I mean, so that's a piece of it. Another piece of it is that there's definitely a genetic link. We now know that. We don't know exactly what it is. We don't understand it completely, but there's a lot of research being done. So there's a genetic piece, and as we diagnose children, sometimes we're also diagnosing a sibling or a parent that also is on the spectrum, but at a much higher functioning level. So they've come in because their 2-year-old is pretty
not with
clearly
his other 2-year-old.
autistic,
Yeah.
but it turns out that the older sister has high functioning autism, and maybe the dad does too. And so we're diagnosing all of them. There is a lot of evidence beginning to point to environmental factors as well. There are clusters of people who are diagnosed that live in certain areas.
You mean like a love canal kind of thing, where they lived on top of the,
Yes,
the sewage and the outflow?
that's what it's beginning to look like. We don't know 100%, but that's what it's beginning to look like.
A
So,
lot of people were thinking it was the vaccinations that the children were getting.
Every piece, I know that's been very controversial, every
Yes.
piece of literature that I've, and reports and studies that I've read on that have ultimately determined that the vaccinations have nothing to do with autism.
right.
Now, that being said, I will tell you that many physicians are choosing at this point to, for their own children, and advising sometimes for if they're a pediatrician for their patients, to spread vaccines, to spread them out a little bit, not because they cause autism, but simply because in the day when I took my children for vaccines, they were spread out. Now we really cluster them, and should there be an autoimmune issue or a sensitivity or an allergy, the child's body may have more difficulty in processing all of those vaccines at the same time. So many parents and physicians are choosing to
All
do
right,
that.
so that's just prudent. It's not necessarily cause and effect.
I think that we know very clearly that vaccines do not cause autism.
Okay.
David, I think we should take our break, and when we come back, I'd like Carrie to speak to our caregivers out there and give them a little bit of advice and some of the wisdom that you have, if you would.
I'd love to.
We're going to take that break, but Carrie, I got to tell you, this time has moved so fast. We got to have you back again soon. You
I
barely
would love to.
defined autism, and so we'll take our break. Thank you, Kenny.
Are you a family caregiver? Are you taking care of a spouse or loved one who can no longer take care of himself or herself? Are you dealing with Alzheimer's disease and don't know what to do? Do you feel burned out, frustrated, and just don't know where to turn? You've tried doctors, lawyers, and mental health professionals and have come to realize that they don't have practical answers to these questions. What you need are experts, non-clinical family caregivers with 25 years of active experience helping thousands of family caregivers like yourself. People who can help you provide a better quality of life for yourself and your loved one. Who you need are David Levy or Paul Vadiato. Reach David at david@caregiverreality.com or reach Paul at caregiverreality.com and let them help you pick the right path towards improving the quality of life for you, the caregiver, and your loved one.
This is Paul Vadiato, co-host of Caregiver Reality Hour. As a spousal caregiver, I know that sometimes things get rough, and sometimes we lose perspective. David Levy and I have over 50 years' experience and expertise on advising caregivers. If you find that you need help, you're a little confused, reach out to us at Paul or David at caregiverreality.com. We're there to help.
This is Caregiver Reality with gerontologist David Levy and caregiver expert Paul Vadiato, who ask you to call in and speak with him on the air toll-free at 888-565-1470. That's 888-565-1470 to share a story or important information. Now, back to today's Caregiver Reality Show.
And we're back, and you're listening to us on WWNN.com and CaregiverReality.com. We're pleased to have you out there. If you're on the radio, it could be iHeartRadio, it could be 1470 AM, right here in the South Florida area. But wherever you are, we hope you're enjoying the show. We're getting a lot of great information about autism on the autism spectrum. Our guest has so much to offer. She's involved in doing a lot of integrated mental health that we'll be bringing her back to discuss, not just kids with autism, but everybody that has a mental health issue. And especially, I can tell you from my perspective, there isn't any caregiver who's dealing with somebody that has a chronic illness that doesn't have depression or other aspects of mental dysfunction involved in that process.
They go hand
and
in
it's
hand.
completely overlooked. Paul?
Carrie, Caregiver Reality is our name. Would you please speak to our caregivers, particularly to them, about what they're going through and give them some words of wisdom, please?
One of the things that we have done at the Florida Comprehensive Autism Center and at the Comprehensive Autism Center, which is part of Philadelphia Mental Health Center, is limited our services, expanded and then limited our services to be for the individuals on the spectrum and their families. We don't take people who are not connected to a client, but we do take anyone who's connected to a client for services. That would be a primary caregiver of any kind. It would be sibling, grandparents, parents, foster mom, the caregivers.
Anyone that interacts in that family dynamic.
In the family. And the reason we do that is the impact of someone with any kind of serious condition is on the entire family. It is not just our client is the whole family. The individual lives in a family system. The individual lives in their world, and there's no one there that is not
Affected by
that
it.
is not affected. In sometimes some positive, but most often some very negative ways and some very difficult ways. And we very often don't think about supporting the siblings of an autistic child, or the dad who is just devastated that his son has been diagnosed and what that's going to mean for his life, or the mom who loves her children but is very torn because she spends most of her time with the one autistic child and not with the other two who are not on the spectrum. And the divorce rate is, I want to say, and it's probably going to be the wrong statistic, but it's somewhere in the high 80s. I want to say it's 86, 88%.
Single moms
Where they're
raising
running away.
Of parents of autistic children are getting divorced. And that's stress.
Stress? I would think so.
Stress, anxiety, depression. It's brutal.
Do you blame them?
No,
I know
of
that's a
course-
loaded question, but I mean,
I don't
one
blame
parent
them.
has to stay and deal with it. All right, let's just make the assumption it's mom. Is it fair because dad can't deal with it to run?
No, it's not fair for dad to run, but it's also not fair for dad to not get support.
All right.
Dad needs support too.
So if dad got support,
Maybe.
hopefully it might help the marriage as well.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And one of the things that we offer, although it's very hard for parents to attend because they have an autistic child or children, but one of the things that we offer is not only marriage counseling, but couples groups. We offer sibling support groups. We offer, there's a variety of things. There was a time when we had a daddy and me group running on Saturday mornings. 'Cause lots of times dads have a hard enough time developing a relationship with a small child, let alone a small child that's on the spectrum.
And
What
let
do I
alone
do with
go
this
to
kid?
work and find time to deal
Right.
with a small child on the
Right.
spectrum.
Right. So we try to develop groups to help give the caregiver support as well as the services for the client. Again, the problem is that very often, and I'm sure that you find this with lots of caregivers of people with from all walks of life, the caregiver's time is taken.
Oh, yes.
And sometimes they don't have the energy to drag themselves to an evening meeting, or even during the day if mom is at home and if her child is in some kind of program. She has so much to accomplish during the day while her child is taken care of, that to get herself
Mentally and physically to the group.
to the group is a difficult thing.
Yes.
Part of what we need to do is to really help her to understand that taking care of herself, putting on that life jacket for herself, or
pulling down the oxygen mask
oxygen
first.
mask for yourself before your kid
Sometimes-
is really important.
You know, I deal with children that have the same condition that my wife does, dysautonomia. So I see a lot of siblings. I see a lot of kids that are caregivers. And I also see moms that just can't see themselves in any other role but running that interference, trying to do the best they can for that daughter or son with autism, but yet it looks like a combination from a distance of denying that it's there and trying to insulate the child from the reality of what they have to face. And I found that quite often is that too much protection sometimes. It's like not hitting on your immune system enough to build up a natural resistance. And if you protect your kid from everything.
I think that's often true. I think that's true for all moms. Speaking for myself, all moms tend to be protective of their children. If you have a child with a special need, it's particularly enticing to keep that child in the nest, protected. You want to wrap them in bubble wrap. The truth is that it's not the best thing for the child, and we very often work with the child and their parents to help the parents to begin to let them go, to grow, to do the things that they can do.
That's the thing I see sometimes is so tough to do. Paul?
Yeah.
Carrie, before we run out of time, can you talk a little bit about the cost and the funding for the facilities that you have both here and in Philadelphia?
Sure. In Pennsylvania, there was a class action lawsuit 25 years ago, and Medicaid pays for a lot of services for children with any kind of mental health diagnosis, including autism. Unfortunately, that was not true in Florida until 2013.
What changed then?
Excuse me, I think it was 2014. There was a motion that eventually went up to it was challenged and went up to the Florida Supreme Court, requiring Florida Medicaid dollars to be available for services for children on the spectrum in Florida. The Supreme Court upheld that, and those dollars are now available. That is why we came down specifically to open up the Florida Comprehensive Autism Center in Broward. We're based in Fort Lauderdale, and we can any child who has a diagnosis of autism is entitled to services in their home and in the school and in our office that we can bill to Medicaid, and the state pays that. That's entirely new. It used to be all self-pay,
Right.
and most children in Florida were not able to afford the services they
And
needed.
that includes the evaluation also?
It does.
All right. Because normally, let's say if you were somebody over the age of 65 and you needed Medicaid to go to a nursing home, it was a question of first medical neediness, and then it was whether or not it was means tested. Did you not have the dollars to be able to do it in the alternative, your own dollars? So what you're saying to me, if I understand you, is that it simply takes a triggering diagnosis from a competent clinician that this child has an autism or mental health issue, and they may be able to avail themselves of Medicaid funding to get help.
Correct, and we can walk them through that process. It's again the Florida Comprehensive Autism Center, and we can walk them through the process to help them enroll their child in Medicaid. It has nothing to do with their income.
Okay, that's where I was
There's
going.
nothing to do with their income. And
So there's no stigma attached to it in terms of you're poor. It's
No.
available
not
to
at
any
all.
child with that
Not at all.
diagnosis.
We have parents who are doctors and lawyers and judges and plumbers and street sweepers, everything under the sun. When you have a child on the spectrum, they need treatment, bottom line.
Gotcha.
So we can provide an evaluation by a psychologist. We have master's level clinicians, behavior specialists, and mobile therapists that go out into the home and to the schools to provide services. We can provide one-on-one services if they need that in the community.
Where
and we can
physically
provide
are you
psychiatric.
located? We're going to have you give the number in a minute, but physically, where are you located? In Broward? Address?
I don't know the address.
How do you go to work?
I don't work there. I don't work at that site.
Oh,
However,
gee, I'm
it is.
sorry.
It is.
I didn't mean to catch you, but
Okay, let's try this. FMHCcares.org.
Okay. FMHCcares.org. Do you know a telephone number?
Nope.
Okay. FMHCcares.org. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to blindside you, but I guess you're much more acquainted with the Philadelphia operation.
I am. I've recently relocated to Florida.
Okay.
To be able to focus more on services.
We'll
and
get
I've
that
just,
up on our
I
website.
just got
We'll
moved.
post that as soon as
So
you
I'm
can tell
sorry.
us your address.
I
and
can
your
tell
phone
you
number.
the number in Philadelphia.
But we'll
I can tell
take-
you multiple numbers in Philadelphia, but
Is,
that's not
is
going to
there an
help.
800 Philadelphia number that could steer them to the right place down here?
There's not an 800 number, but there is a number.
And a website?
And the
FM8.
website down here and a website up there. Up there, it's pmhccares.org.
Rather than confuse the issue,
HCcares.org.
FMHCcares.org. And they will have the contact information.
All the contact
and
information
so
is
that
there.
If you've got a child, and this is a wonderful organization, even though we've barely broken the ice on it, and with Medicaid available to help pay for services, this is a wonderful thing. I mean,
Can you
It's the
give us
beginning of a very wonderful thing.
Carrie,
Yes.
can you give us some last thoughts before, believe it or not, our time is just about up.
Okay. Last thoughts. It is a phenomenal opportunity for us to be able to bring these kinds of services into Florida. There's so many children who have not received any kind of treatment. There's so many children who have not been diagnosed. It's very, very important to get children in before the age of 3. If anyone has any question about whether their child is on the spectrum, if they have concerns, they really need to get to their pediatrician or get in touch with us and schedule yourselves for an evaluation in Broward County.
Do you do outreach for pediatricians to make them more aware of some of the signs and symptoms that they might be looking for?
We do. And we're very happy to talk to pediatricians if they want to get in touch with us as well.
What about at birthing centers? I know you do an APGAR, but is there anything that can be done at birth that might point somebody in the direction that their child might be subject to this?
There is some very new research coming out, but I don't think it's definitive enough for me to speak to it.
Okay.
There are actually some research being done on looking at a prenatal information
wow.
to be able to determine if there's a high percentage of this child is going to be on the spectrum.
So then you
but
could
again,
almost start immediately.
This is groundbreaking. It's not really there yet.
Okay.
We'll know soon.
You heard it here first, folks. This is wonderful stuff. I mean, this was the fastest hour. I say that every week, but this was fascinating. I know you have other things that you do with adults.
Absolutely.
And so we're going to have you back real soon. And Paul's working on a whole mental health show. And
Terrific.
so, South Florida,
Thank you.
America, and the world, it's been another Caregiver Reality Hour. Hope you enjoyed it. Thank you so much for being here. And once you learn your address and your phone
Once
number,
I figure that out,
we're
can I
gonna
come back
have
and tell
back.
you?
And thanks again to
Thank you.
Beasley. Paul?
Carrie, thank you so much for joining us tonight. Everyone have a great week, and caregivers, take care of yourselves. Good evening.
Thank you, guys.
Thanks for joining us for this week's Caregiver Reality Show. Each week, David Levy, a gerontologist, and Paul Vadiato, a caregiver expert with a combined over 25 years of experience, providing practical and realistic help to caregivers struggling to keep up with the needs of a loved one who are unable to care for himself or herself. To reach David Levy, email him at david@caregiverreality.com. Or to reach Paul Vadiato, email paul@caregiverreality.com. And find out more online. Just go to caregiverreality.com. See you next week for another exciting show of Caregiver Reality. The opinions expressed on the preceding sponsored program